On the day I married Daniel Carter, everyone said I was the luckiest woman alive. He was charming, successful, and impossibly handsome. When he smiled, people leaned closer. When he spoke, they listened. And when he looked at me, I felt chosen, like I had won a prize other women secretly envied. I didn't know then that monsters don't always have fangs. Sometimes they wear suits. We met at a charity event. Daniel was standing alone near the balcony, a glass of wine in his hand, watching the city lights. He seemed different from the loud businessmen crowding the room. "You look forward," he had said, smiling gently. "And you look lonely," I replied. He laughed, soft, controlled, perfect. Within weeks, he knew everything about me. My favorite food, my childhood fears, the story about my father leaving when I was 10. He said I was strong. He said I deserved protection. He said he would never abandon me. I mistook possession for protection. We married 6 months later in a grand ceremony. White roses, crystal chandeliers, a diamond ring that made my friends gasp. That was the last day I felt free. The first sign was small. "Why do you need to work?" he asked one evening after our honeymoon. "I earn more than enough." "I love my job," I said lightly. "It makes me feel independent." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. Independent from me? It was the first time his voice carried a sharp edge. I laughed it off. I should not have. Gradually, the changes came like quiet cracks in glass. He didn't like my friends, said they were jealous, said they filled my head with nonsense. He'd sigh dramatically whenever I made plans. "If you loved me, you'd want to spend your time with me." So I canceled dinners. I stopped answering calls. He didn't like my clothes either. Too revealing, too attention-seeking. "You're my wife," he would say, adjusting the neckline of my dress. "Act like it." At first, I thought it was sweet, protective, caring. But love doesn't feel like shrinking. The first time he grabbed my wrists, it wasn't even that hard. We were arguing about a credit card statement. I had bought a gift for my mother without telling him. "You spent my money," he said, his jaw tightening. "It's our money," I corrected. In a blink, his hand wrapped around my wrist, tight. His eyes changed. The warmth vanished. What stared back at me was cold and furious, something ancient and cruel. "Don't ever correct me again." He released me slowly, as if he had done nothing wrong. Later that night, he brought flowers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You make me lose control because I love you too much." And I believed him. That's how monsters survive, on your hope. The physical bruises came months later. The emotional ones came daily. He monitored my phone. He installed cameras for security. He read my messages and accused me of betrayal if I smiled at a male colleague. "Without me, you're nothing," he would say. Sometimes he would be tender afterward, cook dinner, stroke my hair, tell me he couldn't live without me. The cycle became my prison. Fear, explosion, apology, gift, repeat. I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. My laughter disappeared. My shoulders were always tense. I learned how to measure his mood by the way he placed his keys on the table. Soft drop, safe. Loud clang, danger. The night everything changed, it was raining. He had been drinking. I had burned dinner accidentally. He didn't shout at first. He just stared at the blackened pan. "Are you trying to embarrass me?" he asked quietly. "No." The slap came so fast I tasted blood before I felt pain. I fell against the counter. He stepped forward, breathing heavily. For a moment, just a moment, I saw it clearly. There was no love in him, only control, only hunger. And I realized something terrifying. He wasn't losing control. He enjoyed it. That was the night I stopped loving him. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming fight or a heroic escape through a window. It was silent. The next morning, while he was at work, I packed one suitcase. I wore long sleeves to hide the bruises and went to the police station. My hands shook as I told my story. The officer looked at me with understanding eyes. "You're not the first," she said gently, "and you won't be the last, but you're brave." Brave. I hadn't felt brave in years. I filed a report. I went to a shelter. I blocked his number. He called from unknown numbers, left messages that shifted from anger to pleading. "You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. I'll change." But monsters don't change. They just find new victims. The divorce was ugly. He tried to destroy my reputation, told people I was unstable, ungrateful. Some believed him.
That hurt, but the people who truly loved me stayed. My mother held me as I cried. My old friends welcomed me back without questions. Slowly, I began rebuilding. I returned to work. I rented a small apartment. I bought furniture with money I earned myself. The first night alone was terrifying. The second night was peaceful. By the third night, I slept without fear of footsteps outside my door. A year later, I ran into someone from our wedding. "You two looked so perfect together," she said. I smiled gently. Looks can be deceiving, because monsters don't always growl. They charm. They promise. They isolate. They convince you that their cruelty is your fault. But here's what I learned. A monster only has power if you stay in its cage. And I chose to walk out. I didn't marry a monster. I escaped one. And that, finally, made me powerful. I thought leaving Daniel would end the nightmare. I was wrong. Monsters don't disappear when you close the door behind them. Sometimes, they linger in your mind long after they're gone. 3 months after I moved into my small apartment, I still jumped at every unexpected knock. I kept the lights on at night. I double-checked the locks 3 times before sleeping. Even silence felt dangerous. Daniel had filed for shared property claims. He demanded money he didn't need, just to remind me he could still reach me. The legal letters arrived like cold reminders of his existence. "You'll never be free of me," he had once whispered during one of his final calls. For weeks, those words echoed in my head, but something inside me had changed. Fear was no longer stronger than anger. Therapy helped. At first, I hated talking about it. Saying the words out loud made everything real. He controlled me. He hit me. He humiliated me. But my therapist never looked shocked. She never looked judgmental. She simply said, "You survived." Survived. I had spent so long feeling weak that I forgot surviving required strength. The nightmares began to fade slowly. Instead of dreaming about his raised hand, I started dreaming about running. Not away, but forward. Towards something unknown but bright. I began reconnecting with old friends. It was awkward at first. "I should have noticed," one of them said tearfully. "You disappeared." I wanted to blame them, to ask why no one saved me. But the truth was harder. I had defended him. I had covered his cruelty with excuses. He stressed. He didn't mean it. It's my fault. Monsters thrive in silence, and I had protected his silence. One afternoon, I received an unexpected message. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from a woman named Claire. Her message was short. "I think I'm dating your ex-husband. Can we talk?" My hands trembled as I read it. For a moment, I wanted to ignore her. It wasn't my problem anymore. But I remembered the first night Daniel grabbed my wrist. The confusion, the disbelief, the self-blame. I agreed to meet her. Claire was younger than me, soft-spoken, nervous. "He's so charming," she said. But sometimes he gets angry. He says it's because he loves deeply. The exact words he once used on me. My chest tightened. Has he ever blamed you for his anger? I asked carefully. She nodded. Has he tried to isolate you from friends? Another nod. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't scream warnings. I simply told her my story. Everything. The control. The manipulation. The violence. Her face went pale. He told me you were unstable, she whispered. Of course he did. Monsters always rewrite history. Before we left, I placed my hand over hers. Pay attention to patterns, I said gently. Not promises. 2 weeks later, she texted me. I left. For the first time since my divorce, I felt something unexpected. Not fear. Not anger. Relief. Daniel tried to contact me one last time. He showed up outside my workplace. Seeing him again felt surreal. Smaller than I remembered. Less powerful. You've been talking about me, he accused. I've been telling the truth, I replied calmly. His jaw tightened. You're ruining my life. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something astonishing. He looked tired, because control requires constant effort, and he was losing it. No, I said quietly. You ruined your own. For once, I didn't feel small. He walked away, and he never came back. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in small moments. The first time I laughed loudly in public. The first time I wore a dress he used to hate. The first time I disagreed with someone without apologizing. Freedom is built in tiny bricks. A year later, I moved to a new city. A fresh start. I painted my apartment walls yellow, a color Daniel once called tacky. I hung photos of my friends. I left my phone unlocked on the table without fear. Sometimes, I still flinch at loud voices. Sometimes, I still doubt myself. Trauma leaves fingerprints, but it no longer owns me. Recently, someone asked me if I would ever marry again. I smiled. Maybe. But next time, I won't mistake intensity for love. I won't confuse jealousy with devotion. I won't shrink myself to fit someone else's ego. Because I know what a monster looks like now. And more importantly, I know what strength looks like too. It looks like a woman who walked away. It looks like scars that turned into armor. It looks like me. I didn't just escape a monster. I found myself in the process. And that is a story far more powerful than the one that nearly destroyed me. I thought the story was over. I thought monsters eventually crawl back into the dark. But sometimes, when they realize they've lost control, they try one last time to reclaim it. It started with rumors. A colleague pulled me aside one afternoon. I didn't want to believe it, she said gently. But someone's been saying you were abusive in your marriage, that you have emotional issues. I didn't need to ask who. Daniel had always been strategic. If he couldn't control me privately, he would try publicly. For a brief moment, the old fear returned. My chest tightened. My hands felt cold. What if people believed him? Then I remembered something therapy had taught me. Truth doesn't panic. Lies do. The smear campaign grew louder online. Anonymous posts. Subtle accusations. Carefully worded doubts. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was whispering. And whispers travel far. Instead of hiding, I made a choice that terrified me. I spoke. Not dramatically. Not with rage. But clearly. I wrote a long post describing emotional abuse without naming him. I described isolation, manipulation, the cycle of violence. I described how easy it is to mistake control for love. The response shocked me. Messages flooded in. Thank you for saying this. I went through the same thing. I thought I was crazy. I realized something powerful. Monsters rely on silence. And I had just broken it. A month later, Daniel tried again, this time legally. He filed a defamation notice, claiming I had damaged his reputation. My lawyer looked at the paperwork and almost smiled. He's bluffing, she said. He has nothing. But he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to exhaust me. Control through pressure. It almost worked. One night, overwhelmed, I sat on my apartment floor and cried. "I'm so tired," I whispered to the empty room. Healing is not a straight line. Strength wavers, but it doesn't disappear. The next morning I stood up, and I fought back, legally, calmly, with evidence, screenshots, medical reports, police documentation. Facts don't flinch. When the case was dismissed, something inside me shifted permanently. He no longer felt like a monster. He felt like a small, angry man terrified of being exposed. Months passed. Silence followed. Real silence. The kind that feels clean. I started volunteering at a local support group for women who had experienced domestic abuse. Sitting in that circle the first time, I saw myself in every trembling voice. One woman said, "I feel stupid for staying." I leaned forward. "You weren't stupid," I told her gently. "You were hopeful. Hope is not weakness. It's what monsters exploit." Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Aaron. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't overly charming. He didn't try to sweep me off my feet. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. The first time he disagreed with me, he smiled and said, "Tell me why you see it that way." No anger, no dominance, just curiosity. And that scared me more than Daniel ever had, because healthy love felt unfamiliar. I moved slowly. I told him everything about my past. He didn't try to save me. He didn't promise revenge. He simply said, "You deserve better," and meant it. One night, months later, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked lighter, not because life had been easy, but because I had reclaimed myself piece by piece. Daniel once told me I was nothing without him. Now I own my own apartment, built my own career, helped other women escape their cages. Monsters don't just destroy. Sometimes they unintentionally create warriors. A year after the court case, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Daniel had moved away. His new relationship had ended. His reputation had quietly faded. No dramatic downfall. No public scandal. Just consequence. Because eventually, when people see the pattern, they step back. And monsters are powerless without victims. If you had met me on my wedding day, you would have seen a glowing bride in white. If you met me now, you'd see something stronger. Not naive, not afraid, not shrinking. I once thought marrying Daniel was the biggest mistake of my life. But it wasn't. Staying would have been. Leaving was the bravest thing I ever did. And here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes the monster isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of your strength. I didn't just survive the monster. I outgrew him. And this time, I am no one's cage. 10 years passed. If you had told the girl in the white wedding dress that one day she would speak on stages about survival, she would have laughed nervously and adjusted her veil. Back then, I thought love meant endurance. Now I know love means safety. My life today looks ordinary. I wake up early. I make coffee. I sit by the window where sunlight spills across yellow walls, the same color Daniel once mocked. Aaron and I never rushed into marriage. We built something slowly, carefully, brick by brick. The first time he raised his voice, not in anger, but excitement during a football game, I flinched. He noticed immediately. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to scare you." That moment told me everything. Not that he was perfect, but that he cared when I felt unsafe. Monsters don't care about your fear. They feed on it. Healing didn't erase the past. Sometimes I still remember the sound of Daniel's keys hitting the table. Sometimes I still wake from dreams where I'm trapped in a house with no doors. But now, when those memories surface, they don't drown me. They remind me. They remind me of the woman who packed one suitcase. The woman who walked into a police station with shaking hands. The woman who chose uncertainty over abuse. That woman saved my life. And she was me. A few years ago, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sentence written in familiar handwriting. I hope you're happy. No apology. No ownership. Just curiosity, maybe even resentment. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I folded it once and threw it away, because closure doesn't come from monsters. It comes from yourself. The support group I once joined now runs in a larger building. I help coordinate workshops about recognizing emotional manipulation. Whenever I tell my story, there's always one woman sitting quietly, eyes wide, absorbing every word. I see the questions forming in her mind. Is this happening to me? Am I exaggerating? Is it really that bad? I always end with the same message. If you're constantly shrinking to keep someone comfortable, that isn't love. If you're afraid of the person who says they love you, that isn't love. And if you're waiting for them to change while losing yourself in the process, please know this, you deserve peace. Some women leave immediately. Some take months. Some aren't ready. I don't judge them, because leaving is terrifying, but staying is worse. One evening, after a workshop, a young woman approached me. I think I married a monster, she whispered. I didn't gasp. I didn't dramatize it. I simply asked, Are you safe tonight? She nodded slowly. Good, I said. Then tonight you breathe. Tomorrow we plan. That's the thing about monsters. They want urgency. They want chaos. They want you too confused to think. But escaping them requires calm steps, clear thinking, support, and the belief that you are worth saving. Sometimes people ask if I hate Daniel. I don't. Hate keeps you tied to someone. Indifference sets you free. He was not a supernatural creature. He wasn't cursed. He was a man who chose control over compassion. And I was a woman who eventually chose herself. On the anniversary of the day I left, I do something small but meaningful. I buy myself flowers, not because someone hurt me, not because I survived something tragic, but because I celebrate the day I stopped tolerating less than I deserved. 10 years ago, I married a monster. But that is not the headline of my life anymore. Now the headline reads, She left. She healed. She built something better. And here is the truth I want every woman to know. You are not weak for loving deeply. You are not foolish for believing promises. And you are not broken because someone abused your trust. The monster was never your fault. Walking away was your power. I once thought I married a monster. Now I know something more important. I was never the victim in this story. I was the hero who refused to stay.